Hey, Fight fans, it's Michelle Joy Phelps, and I'm joined now with none other than Abel Sanchez. Abel, thank you so much for having me up here in Big Bear. It's a beautiful day. Probably not the circumstances of which I would want to meet with you on, given that there's been some recent news in the media. First and foremost, how are you doing right about now?
I'm doing well. We have a lot of young men in here that are training very hard, so it's life goes on. We have probably 6 fights in the next month and a half, so we're busy.
Mm-hmm. Do you mind if we get right into it?
No, absolutely not.
I want to read a bit of one of the statements made by Golovkin, and I just want to get your thought on a part that stood out to me. It said, or he said, "I want to build on what I have already achieved and continue to better myself. Therefore, I will not be training with Abel Sanchez." When you read that in the context of which it was written, it can seem a bit like, I don't know if I want to use the word harsh, but it just seemed like it didn't flow like nicely. How did you take from reading his statement?
I thought he wants to move on. I respect that, but obviously it's not something that I wanted to hear. But it's unfortunate that fighters get to a certain point when it's all I and not we. We did a lot of hard work together. We did have a lot of accomplishments, set a lot of records. But it was a team effort. There was managers, there was promoters, there was fighter, there was myself. So his family, my family, we all made sacrifices to get to where he's at now. So it's a little disheartening that it's an I thing and not a we.
Mm-hmm. He insinuated a new trainer compensation. Do you want to clarify? Because I know there are people who want to say that maybe you were asking for more. Maybe, you also mentioned that it was less than what you would have initially received. Do you want to clarify exactly, I guess, what it was?
I guess the only thing I can say about that is that it wasn't what it was normally, and I chose not to accept it. I chose not to accept it, and that's why we're not together right now. That's all that is. I'd rather not get into numbers, but it was much less than what I was getting before, what trainers normally get, historically what trainers get. And I chose not to accept it, so he's training somewhere else.
There's mention of it being a flat fee. Was that the case, a flat fee as opposed to a percentage?
Yes, it was basically a flat fee, but like I said, I chose not to accept it.
What a lot of people don't understand is when a fighter and a coach split, how that affects your family, the future of your family as well. And unlike most companies that receive severances, it's just a phone call and that's it. It's everything's done and over with. For somebody who's invested 9 years into his career, that's got to be very hard for you to swallow.
I think that for all of us coaches, I think that we are the ones that are most with the fighter. We make sacrifices with our families. We make sacrifices with our time. That's something we can't get back. We may be able to make more money in the future, but the time that we lose in the process is something that we can't get back. And historically, the coach has been the only one that's never been protected by a contract in a athlete's career. The manager is, the promoter is. That's the hard part to swallow, because it was a lot of time lost from my family. I know that a lot of people on the internet say a lot of things. They do a lot of talking, but they talk about things, or they talk about lives that they've never lived, so they have no idea what the sacrifices are. And when we do without, when our family does without us, when something like this happens, we all suffer. I mean, they suffer also. So when we get somebody on the internet saying, first of all, we have a bunch of geniuses on the internet that know about everything. When they start saying about how, well, the fighters do it for their family and for the future, I guess they don't consider that we have a family too, and we have future, and we have dreams too, and our kids have dreams too. So that's the hardest part, I think, not for me, for my family and for the families that are left without that future compensation. That I'm sure that, although they may not talk about it, but the kids, I'm sure, are looking forward to something in the future. But it's extremely hard for the ones left behind.
Yeah. Have you? Or before I ask that question, was there any indication that this was coming? Was there any signs that you felt that maybe he was reconsidering, or did this completely blindside you?
It completely blindsided me. We had a press conference at LA Live, I believe it was about a month and a half ago, to announce the signing of the contract with the AZN, and John Skipper was there, obviously G was there, myself, and everything was fine. At least it seemed fine anyway. There was no indication to me, there was nothing, so it was kind of blindsiding.
Have you spoken to him since? Have you tried to speak to him since you both made the announcements? I know it just happened, but I'm just curious.
No, actually we have not since he came up on a couple of days ago and picked up his equipment and said he would be going somewhere else, and I said okay. I shook hands and wished him good luck, and he went. Did
you know that prior to his announcement, or was that made out?
No, actually on Wednesday morning when I drove up, there was a different car. We run at 6:30 in the morning here. We all meet here in the gym and we run at 6:30, and when I drove up there was a different car in my driveway, and I thought that it could be him. It wasn't a car that I've ever seen before, so at about 6:40, 6:45 when everybody was gone, he was down there and we had a small chat. Like I said, he thanked me and I said he was going somewhere else and shook hands and he left.
I guess I'm trying to just understand, because I think it shocked everybody. I think it really shocked everybody. It must be difficult to be reading, because you said that you just chose not to agree to the contract, but then there's headlines that you've been fired, which is completely different. Completely different.
It's unfortunately, like I said, we have a lot of geniuses that know everything on the internet that were not present or have not been present or privy to any of the conversations that have been had. It's a business decision on both parts, and I don't think it's fair to he or to me that people assume or say things that are completely false. If they have questions like you're asking me, they can ask him also. But it was nothing that was how can I say it? Nothing that was mean-spirited or anything like that. We didn't scream at each other or nothing like that. He's a grown man. I'm a grown man. He said what he had to say, and I said what I had to say, and he goes on, and I go on.
You guys weren't just trainer and coach. You guys were friends, and you guys have spent holidays together with families. That's got to be painful. I know, all business talk aside, you're losing a friend also. I mean, that's got to hit really hard.
I think that because of when young men get to that level, there's a lot of people that get around them, new advisors get around them, and I think because of that, I've lost not only a friend, but I feel like a son. Because all my kids in my gym, they put their lives on the line for us, and by putting their lives on the line, we become their savior, more or less. To make sure that nothing happens to them, make sure that they're safe. So yeah, I feel like I am losing a very important part of my life.
How have the guys responded to it?
You know what? They have their own careers to do. They're obviously aware of what's going on, but they haven't mentioned anything, really. They just go on and do what they have to do they hope to be where he's at now. They hope to be as good as he is right now. And the only way to do that is to continue training hard in the gym.
I know that you've spoken to some of the press, and I'm picking quotes from what you have said, that you counter-offered according to what they offered.
I would really rather not get into that. That's something that is between he and I, and there's been a lot of things that have been stretched in the press, like there usually is. I would rather not allow it to get any more stretched.
Yeah. Well, again, like you were saying, life goes on. You have guys that are here depending on you. You also have Murat Gassiev, who is making his heavyweight debut.
Yes.
A big move.
Yes,
Big
yes.
move. Also going to be fighting on DAZN. DAZN, as you know, is already featuring some of the biggest heavyweight stars out there. So we can only imagine what's coming, whether in the months or in the years. So let's talk a bit about his move to heavyweight. He says that he's, 225 pounds right now?
225 right now. When he first came to me, he came at 192 pounds, 6'2.5". He hasn't grown that much, but he's in height, but he's grown in girth. We talked about the heavyweight move in 3 or 4 years, and it just so happens that the tournament came along at the right moment.
Yeah.
He was in the tournament. He did all the things in the tournament. There's really nothing else for him to do at cruiserweight. The eventual winner, or the one that beat him in the finals, moved to heavyweight also. So there's really no sense for him to go back to that level, to the cruiserweight level. So moving up to heavyweight, since he's always sparred with heavyweights because I couldn't get no cruiserweight to spar with him, he knows how to handle himself. He knows the issues that are going to come up with these bigger guys. So now it's a matter of putting a little more muscle on him with the weight that he's got on him. I like for him to be around 230 solid, and we go from there. But it is a great move for him. Hopefully the end of June or the beginning of July will be the date that he's targeting.
Now, reflecting back on July 21st, the big night in Moscow, it seemed like in his corner you guys were getting a bit frustrated. I guess he wasn't sticking to the game plan.
Really, it wasn't frustration. I've never said anything about this, and he has never said anything about this, but the reason he's here a year later in this gym, or 11 months later, is because he had reconstructive surgery on his shoulder. He had his nose completely redone because it was shattered. He couldn't breathe. His right hand was shattered also. So, but to talk about it now and to take away from, or to talk about it then and take away from Usyk's great performance would have been foolish for us. I can tell you now that it took him 11 months recuperation for him to get back. The operations, and then operations a month after, and 10 months of recuperation, and now he's back. He's been in the gym since Wednesday, I believe. So it's 2-3 days. That night, it wasn't frustration. What it was for me is I wanted to make sure that I kept him. I was trying to be as negative with him, or as I shouldn't say negative, as forceful as possible to keep him in the fight, just so that he's not going to quit on me. I know he's not going to quit on me, but what's going to happen is a lot of fighters that have the big heart like this kid does would just stay in there and just allow the other guy to hit him and just to go the 12 rounds. I didn't want that. I wanted Murat to I threatened him with stopping the fight because I wanted him to fight back. Even though it was hurting, even though I knew that those injuries had happened in the Wlodarczyk fight, believe it or not, which was 3 fights before that one, or 2 fights before that one. He fought the Dorticos fight with a torn shoulder and a broken hand, or a messed up hand and a messed up nose, and he did very well. The only difference is Dortico stood in front of him. Usyk gave us that movement that didn't allow him. We didn't have the mobility because he was frustrated inside. Maybe that I can say, but I didn't want him to quit mentally. So I kept imploring him, and I kept threatening him because that's the only way that I can make sure that he was throwing punches. I didn't want him to be a punching bag, because then I would have stopped the fight. It wouldn't have been bad enough for the referee to stop it. I would have stopped it if it would have gotten to the point where he wasn't making an effort. Even in the 12th round, he landed some good shots on Usyk. But Usyk fought a perfect fight. At 100%, I would have loved to have seen Murat at 100% and see how he would have done. But we're going to get, hopefully we're going to get another look at him in the heavyweight division. Usyk is going to do real well, and hopefully Murat does well too, and maybe we'll meet down the road.
Obviously, the goal isn't to jump straight into the heavyweight champions, because that would just be foolish. You got to shake off the ring rust, and also, just sort of warm up in the heavyweight scene. Who would you, I guess, consider a good matchup for him?
Any of the young kids that are in the 16, 18 and 0 bracket, I would say Kanaki, the Polish kid, would be a good fight. Trevor Bryan's a good fight. Manuel Char is a good fight. I don't want to go to the elite right away. I want to give him a couple fights before he has to step up to the bigger guys. But I would say by the end of the year, we may be in contention somewhere. I think he's already been at that championship level, so he knows what to expect, and we know how to train for that level. So by the end of the year, beginning of next, he should be in contention for one of those titles.
Now we know that he once sparred, or a few times sparred, Deontay Wilder. I've been here where I've seen him sparring heavyweight, so it's nothing new for him. How long do you think that it will be? Are we talking end of the year, early next year, or late next year before we see him in the likes with someone like Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, and Deontay Wilder?
I would say the elite level by the middle of next year. The second tier level, let's just say, I would say at the beginning of the year. He has also sparred with Vladimir Klitschko too. So he has always sparred with heavyweights because I could never get any cruiserweight to spar with him. Areola has a very
He's very fond of him.
yes, he has a very funny clip on YouTube about the days he was sparring with him. But he's used to sparring with big guys. Hopefully the 225, 230 with some muscle to him, he'll be able to compete in a 12-round fight. As a cruiserweight, as a 200-pounder, obviously the bigger guys are going to be a little too heavy in mass for him. But by the time we get him to 230 in the next 5, 6, 7 months, with some muscle on him, I think he'll be able to compete well.
Are we looking at 2, 3, 4 fights a year?
I would hope that he fights 3 more times before the end of the year. Hopefully in June, and maybe in September and in December. He's a young man who needs to stay busy. He's a gym rat. He was chomping at the bit. I remember him just WhatsApping me probably once a week, telling me that he wanted to come. But they wanted to keep him going to these the therapy sessions and the recuperation sessions that he was doing in Germany for as long as possible to give us the best chance. There was no reason to rush it.
Right.
So now that he's here, now we want to keep him busy.
Well, right, because you just don't want to rush into something and then re-injure yourself, and then exactly have to go back to square one. Let's talk a bit about your other guys. So I want to make sure I say his name right. So Arsen Goulamirian.
Yes.
Bless you, Arsen. Goulamirian. Now we know that the WBA has ordered for him to face Beibut Shumanov for the WBA title. What's going on with that right now? Because we know that, I guess, what is it? Sometime May 11th is the deadline.
May 11th is the deadline.
Okay.
The deadline for the fight to happen. This was set back in February. So it's obvious now, May 11th being so close, there's no contract signed, there's nothing, there's no venue in place, so that fight's not going to happen. So on May 12th, I imagine the WBA will name Arsen Goulamirian the regular champion. If they do that, then he will fight sometime in June against an available contender. I don't know who. The WBA will make that recommendation, and I think they talked about June 29th for a fight.
Right now, it seems like you got a lot of the big boys here. So you got Murat, you got Arsen, you got Guido.
Right.
So sparring shouldn't be too difficult for you guys up here.
No, but we'll get more sparring coming in. It's good for these guys to have different looks from different guys. So we always have a lot of sparring coming in to make sure that we get not only ready the right way, but ready with enough different look of sparrings.
And lastly, Abel, I wanted to ask you about the fight that's this coming weekend. We got Canelo versus Jacobs.
Let me tell you about another one. I have Michel Soro also.
Okay.
Michel Soro just got the fight against Castaño just got ordered by the WBA.
Okay.
They had to go into a negotiation period. I think it's 15 or 20 days, and then after that it goes into if no agreement comes, then it goes into a purse bid, and that fight should happen within 90 to 120 days. That being the 154-pound belt that Castaño has right now. He beat Lara in his last fight at Islandi Lara, so Michel Soro should be coming to camp probably within the next couple weeks.
Okay. You got a stacked stable.
We have a lot of very, very good fighters. We've been blessed. They work hard. We work hard, and we're having success.
Yeah. And do you want to give a prediction for that fight, Canelo versus Jacobs?
I believe Canelo should win.
Okay.
Canelo's the more talented fighter. Canelo's hand speed and in boxing skills, I think, will be a little too much for Danny. But Danny's going to put up a fight. It won't be an easy fight for Canelo. I think Canelo wins it in the last third of the fight. It's going to be a close fight leading up to 7th or 8th, and I think Canelo goes away winning the last 3 or 4 rounds.
All right, Abel, thank you so much for your time. I always appreciate it. And you know what? Onwards and upwards, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a lot of young men here that are vying for that glory also.
Well, you definitely have talent here, so I don't doubt for a moment you're going to have several more world champions here in your stable.
Yeah, this year we'll have 2 more.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for your time, and I guess we'll speak to you guys soon. Bye, fight fans. Hey Fight fans, it's Michelle Joy Phelps. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure you do so by clicking this icon right here, or else